So welcome to the panel on, we had to find a theme, but the work of these two people will easily fit into the theme, and it'll be broad enough that we can have a really interesting conversation. Now, I know about, to be honest, I know about Francis really through Abutombo's podcast. And yeah, but a Frempong knows him better. So that's why we are both here. And basically, so Akua and I are like, I know her a bit better. And I don't know whether you read her piece, The Year of Return. She wrote a piece on the Year of Return. And it was a critique on social class. It was a powerful critique on what's happening in Accra and how the people benefiting from the things that are going on in or amongst the returnees in Accra's elite or middle class is really a small group of people. So who is benefiting from a lot of the changes taking place in the city? And that's just one small part of, she's also a PhD candidate and an anthropology student as well. So, but she can talk about herself better than I can even describe. And I will start by allowing each of them to introduce themselves, because also, Francis, his work, as far as I know, you have also touched on, you have a whole project on capturing the middle class. And I found that fascinating as to why you're doing, so I won't ask you the question now, but I'll just ask you to spend some time, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, introducing yourselves and how your work relates to Accra. Thank you.
Hello? Wow, okay, loud. Hi everyone, my name is Akua. I also go by Debbie and I also go by Nara. I'm also a musician in Accra. Yeah, my work, I think a lot of my work for me is personal. And when I think about social class, I often think about how I moved schools as a kid in Ghana. And I think each of the 3 schools I attended, had very different class demographics. And so my own experiences in terms of my neighborhood, where I was growing up with, my church, the type of people who came to my church, and the type of people that I met in school, it really shaped my own experiences of class, but also how I was being forced to treat people because I was suddenly now in a different school where wealthier people were attending, or I was also being treated differently because I came from a school that was not considered as good as the school I was at. And so I've sort of lived, for me personally, I felt like I've lived in these cross-class spaces, and I bring that focus to my work. My research is mostly on Christianity and gender in Ghana, and I'm very interested in denormalizing Christianity. I want to expose how and why it works so well in Ghana. Beyond people saying that it's our culture or it's all we've known, or, it just fits so well with who we are. I think, there's also an idea about how Africans are so religious, etc. And I think that there are very important links to be made between whatever you would consider a middle class culture, upper middle class culture, and Christian culture in Ghana. And so I think, post Rollins, Girish and I were talking about this a little bit this week. Churches are really institution builders here. They have schools, they're involved in healthcare, psychological services. I think just like 2 days ago, my dad went for his certificate from the Ghana Christian Psychological Council or something like that. They're certified. They're giving each other degrees. And like putting stamps on them. And this is across every major institutional space you would have in Ghana. You would find Christians who are going to be able not just to mobilize themselves, but to also contribute and build something. And so I think, that relationship to class and how we, not just the financial aspects, but also how we read it in each other, how we talk to each other, how we build space when we are together in the same place. Those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in my work. So how does class, imagined through, Christian performance, like what your hair looks like, how you speak to people when you enter a room, how are they reading you? Those things affect us not just, in Christian spaces, but also in our workplaces and in activist spaces too, because those kinds of class Christian forms, we find it everywhere. So in my work, I'm really trying to dig into that, especially in feminist spaces. I want to look at how these, class Christian ideas have impacted our feminist space. What has it allowed us to say? What has it not allowed us to say? What does it mean for women or people who are raised as women and are not women, and vice versa? All these things, I think, it's impacted us in the activist space more than we can talk about, and so that's where I'm coming from in my work. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Francis Kokoroko, and I was featured on Motomo's podcast, If More, Let's Divide. And I think people were wondering what I had in the cup. It was hot tea that morning, and today I have coffee. Um, I am a photographer. I sometimes find it a bit limited when I have to use that label. But then again, it makes it easier for everyone. I also work as a journalist, and I've been working with Reuters, I think, since 2013. So I've been at it for a while. For me, stumbling on photography um, was life changing in the sense that I realized that I like to experience new things every day, just like every human, and mine is more intense. So, from sitting behind the computer coding since first year, I used to sell software. I realized that photography gave me the kind of freedom that I wanted to experience new spaces. And funny enough, Accra or Ghana always presents me with new um, opportunities to experience new things every day. So it's kind of hard for me to toe that long line to go for a visa to go to the US or to the UK, because I feel there's so much complexities in our country and in the city in itself that I will want to experience. Accra's Growing Middle Class was a project I started, I think, 2016, um, simply because I found myself not really belonging to any particular group, but you can say I associate with a particular group. And for me, working as a journalist also helps me go to different spaces, right? So um, I'm in the morgue at one time with a lot of dead bodies, and the next day I'm in the office of the president, you know. So it kind of made me see um, the differences in our lives and the kind of spaces that we inhabit and the politics around it, you know. So it got me thinking about the middle class. I think I grew up in a working class single mother who go to work early morning and come back late, and I had to hold the fort for me and my sister. She didn't have much, but funny enough, I also didn't think about money that much, and I didn't feel we didn't have money or we had so much money. So money wasn't really a thing, but you know, learning about social classes, I began to realize that our city was changing. Um, why was it changing? It was changing because there was this drive, uh, the drive to attain, you know, go to Oxford Street, a whole lot of advertisements on billboards, trying to program us to aspire to a certain kind of lifestyle. From Adenta to Osu, they are preaching you something like you need to buy this car, You need to bet, you need to save, you need to own this dream house, you need to. So I saw the landscape also changing to cater to the desires of the people. So the middle class became exciting because the middle class is elusive when you talk about social classes. You can't really define it. So for me, it was a perfect way to use photography to expand this idea of the middle class. So for me, yes, I will pay attention to the kind of environment that I am and what people are up to, and also the sharp contrast, right? There's this photo I have, if you've seen some of the pictures from the project, is I think the Kanda post office. There's this wall, right, that divides a dead football park, and then you see the high rise, and every 3 o'clock you see people from the neighborhood coming to. And Kanda is also a very interesting place because when you look at it from up, you see Nima on one side. And so for me, that picture like kind of defines everything for me when you talk about the middle class. So I was using photography as a tool to kind of open up that conversation on what this dream is, and this chase, and how also the landscape is changing. So for me, it was a way for me to continually use my camera to document how the landscape is changing, but with this new purpose that I was interested in. So it rather focused on that. So the middle class is a long-term project that I don't think of stopping because I've not gone back to it in about 2 years, and now the changes I'm beginning to see is even the other photos I have looks obsolete now. Like the flashy cars I thought were flashy cars are not flashy cars anymore. So also I'm gonna be seeing how these things become old school and not so middle class in the near future, and see how the project goes. So basically that's about it for.
So Frempong, feel free to also ask questions, or while we're here, thank you so much. I guess I want to start with something that when I was looking into basically Occupy Flagstaff House, the protest was described as a middle class protest, right? And when I spoke to the organizers when I spoke to members of Occupy Ghana, one of them said to me, his name is Esankoma. He said, "What is the middle class?" Like, he's like, "I have done my research and I don't even know who is the middle class." At the same time, he recognizes that he has privilege that other people do not have. So there is that recognition from him that there is privilege that we have that other people do not have, so we speak for them, right? So that's one thing I'm thinking about, is how this idea of the middle class is also about the idea of speaking for others, which I want to explore. I don't even know what the answer, but that's one thing. Another thing is, when I spoke to more people like Kofi Bentel and Esankoma and a few others, they all knew each other. They're all lawyers, but they also all had very Christian backgrounds, born again, Pentecostals, charismatics. So I'm wondering, there is a connection between, okay, on the one hand, there's basically gentrification, but there's, put that aside, there's also this idea of the middle class it's not one thing. It cannot be easily identified, but there's this idea that if you're middle class, you have a responsibility, but it comes with a baggage. Whether it's religious baggage or it's something else. Can you just speak to that in your own work, or whether you see things in that way or not? I'm just kind of exploring these things with you.
And for me, Akua, I want you to address this question that's related to kind of helping us to understand what normal Christianity is and why the need to denormalize it vis-a-vis, the middle class, for example.
So I think I can answer. You know, I remember, I don't know who it was. It might have been Enima or a friend of mine who was like, you know, amongst like middle and upper middle class Ghanaians, like some of what we do is to say that we have less money than we do. Like, you know, people are like, I'm middle class. And it's like, no, you're actually not middle class. Like, you would be upper middle class, right? And so I think because it's difficult to define, like I wouldn't say Occupy Ghana is, it's difficult, right, to say what middle class is, because there's the financial side, and then also you can be one disaster away from financial ruin, but then there's also the social side. That's who your family is, what your ethnicity is, where you live, where you went to school, all these things that kind of add up to show how people read you. And so when I use middle class, I think I have to use it ideologically, because in terms of the financial side, I'm not even really well versed in it. I don't really quite understand it. But I think of it as a set of norms around your approach to money, your approach to giving, your idea of what the family is, your idea of what national responsibility is, your idea of like who you become as a citizen. And I see that as coming from Christianity as well. When you were saying that the middle class, you know, has like this burden to be like, okay, now we have to help the country. I just thought of my high school, you know, very elite high school in Tema, SOS. And most of it was to train us to like help our country, right? Like it was a lot of like training, you have to come back to Ghana. But actually it was like exploitative, right? It's like you're supposed to be responsible for your country, but so that you become a business owner. You know, so some of these logics and these conversations around helping others, you know, becoming a responsible citizen, like what do we actually mean by that, right? It means that you are going to have power over somebody else, not actually that you're going to relate to somebody and see the holes in your own life so that we can build something better together. You know, so I really see, I think of, you know, middle class as ideological. Like I see it as like a set of practices that people are leaning towards. But because, you know, back to like what's normal Christianity, because I think Christianity in Ghana, I mean, it's so nebulous. Like there are different practices in different social classes, right? Like different social classes practice Christianity differently. I guess what I mean is like on the national level, when we go into these institutions, schools, churches, the places where the home, the domestic, the places where we are all actually supposed to be, what are we supposed to act like? That's what I'm thinking about when I say, you know, normalizing Christianity. And in that context, you know, the president can come to your church. You know, the president who had a scandal last week can come to your church and sit in the front seat and, you know, shake everyone's hands. So that's the normal part of Christianity. You know, it doesn't challenge power either. You know, so I think that the whole, the responsibility side and the not challenging power side, they sit well with each other, right? So you can set yourselves up to say, you know, we're good, moral, middle class Christian citizens. We're going to help our fellow, we're going to help Ghana, you know, poor Ghana. And then you don't actually have to challenge power, right? You can just hang out with those who have power and then continue to set yourself up as this person, you know. And I think that we're facing that in a lot of our institutions, you know, even in our feminist orgs, we're facing that a lot, you know. So yeah, that's how I see those connections. Yeah.
It's quite interesting how you mentioned the protest, and it kind of brought me to the recent protest we had, the Kumi Preku Reloaded. You know, for me, if you should ask me, I don't think it was as punchy as the 1995 Kumi Preku. And now, you know, there's this whole generation that is classified almost as middle class, or ascribed to that ideology of middle class. Twitter, you know, wasn't, you know, Twitter was founded in 2006 and Kumi Preku was in 95. So at that time you could like people were coming out to actually voice out their grievances back then. I don't think I was there documenting the protest, and I don't think they had the numbers, you know. But that doesn't make it less impactful, if you should ask me, right? So I'm wondering if the middle class we have now is actually speaking for the people, right? I doubt it, in the sense that, like, really, there's real action happening outside. You know, I drove in and I saw your security guys, the people on the street, and I mean, they don't really know there's something happening here, right? And they have real problems, if you should ask me. So, yes, we have the privilege to discuss stuff like these. But then again, there are people who are also burdened by the fact that they need to face the everyday struggle.